Thank you. How are the sequence? I rant and rave a lot, so I don't need that. I've got one of these on. I got to tell you, this is a really tough gig. I got to follow some of the best tellers I've ever heard, and then Rhoda, who sings, and then in front of me are these little kittens. You made it really tough on me. Retirement nearly killed me. It was tough. You see, when men transition to retirement, it can be really difficult. The emotional swing can be like the depths of depression and despair, like you're at the bottom and it's just misery. Or it can be like the first time I saw my beautiful grandchild for the first time in late December. That much joy, that much fulfillment. And having bipolar, I'm always trying to find that middle, and it ain't easy. Now, there's another bad part of this, and that is what depression can do for older people, especially older men. We seek isolation. We seek to withdraw. We look everywhere for help, but we don't seem to be able to find it unless you have a computer close by. It was tough. It can lead to illness. It can lead to suicide. It can lead to Alzheimer's. The outcomes are terrible. And this is how my story began. I was 58. My wife was 52. And she had been working at the University of Cincinnati. Please keep it down. And she saw, after 31 years, she saw all the changes coming. And even if she loved her job, she knew it was time to leave. I had that business of organizational development and organizational consulting. I figured I could take that anywhere. So we chose Asheville. What the hell was I thinking? Tattoo parlors, yoga studios, organizational development, not so good. So I went down deep. I went even further down. It wasn't pretty. Now, my wife, who was a doer, had a list of 37 things she was going to accomplish in retirement. And damn it, in 2 months, she knocked them all off. I, too, had a list. It contained 2 items, sulk and mope. Well, my wife wanted really desperately to tear me away from that computer. It was 24/7. I was around the computer all the time. She said she had to get me away. She figured, how much news, weather, sports, information, and porn can a guy watch? She was mostly right. Well, she decided to take me to a program called Marketing to Boomers and Beyond. And the reason is because she decided to go from being this professor and dean and all these wonderful accolades to walking dogs. She never had a business before, so she wanted to learn a little bit of business about walking dogs. Now, she told her colleagues back at the university about her desire, and one of them said it perfectly. She said to my wife, "Please listen, kiddies. So you're going to be dealing with a higher breed of animal, are you?" So I went to this program, and I'm looking out the window, and I'm thinking, I wonder what my best friend's doing now. What's the internet up to? And then the keynote speaker came up. His name was Mr. Moody. Great name for someone bipolar, by the way. And Rick Moody's words changed my life and eventually the lives of so many other men. He said this. He said that when men and women retire, we go through very much of the same emotions. However, he added, women handle themselves so much better in retirement. They socially network better, they personally disclose at a much higher level, and generally they handle change so much better than men. It was like a jolt of electric shock therapy. My brain waves were altered, and I leaned into my wife and I said, "Cindy, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a men's group." So from that point forward, I plowed ahead. I talked with lots of people. The men basically said the same thing. This is a great idea. Lots of luck, because it ain't going to work, because men will never sit around and personally disclose. That was my objective. I wanted groups where guys could actually talk to each other about serious issues we face as we retire. All the men said, yeah, good luck. We're not conditioned to do that. But then I found an amazing source of support. Women. One in particular, besides my wife, named Betty. Betty was amazing. She heard the story and she said, I think that will work. Not only that, she gathered 7 other women executives from Asheville, and they heard the story and they basically said, go for it, man. And I did. The first meeting of Men's Wisdom Works convened on October the 12th, 2009, just 10 months after we moved. It was kind of a strange meeting, to say the least. Every guy said they're only there because I made them come. One guy actually said it better. He said he's only there because he didn't want me to be alone. But then we had to introduce ourselves, and a fellow named Gene spoke. And Gene said, kiddies, hold your ears. Gene said, I kill baby seals for a living. What? Then he fessed up. He said, well, actually, he says, I work for a major oil company out of Houston. And if you compare oil, big oil, to killing baby seals, maybe baby seals is a little bit held in higher regard than working for major oil. Ah, Gene. And then there was Albert. Albert, to say he was a curmudgeon is like saying Mount Mitchell and Mount Everest are tiny little molehills. Albert was a curmudgeon. And he had arthritis. He was racked with arthritis. At 87, retired psychologist, he was bent over. And at the end of the meeting, he just pointed that finger at us and he said, if this is going to work, you all better be fucking authentic. Wow. Folks, those words became the mantra, the watchwords for our Men's Wisdom Works. And we went on. Now, what do? We actually meet twice a month for 2 hours at a time, and we talk about stuff you're not supposed to talk about. First of all, we admit that we're pips, previously important persons. And the topics we'll talk about will be, how has your relationship changed with your spouse, your husband, your wife, your friend, and your children? Or it could be, how do you find meaning in this new era of retirement, having gone from pip to trying to find meaning? We talk about things like relationships with our children, relationships all over the place. We're not supposed to be talking about relationships, but we do. And then there's the social aspect. We all gather together for brunch or breakfast or lunch in between meetings. We socialize a lot. We're doing stuff that men aren't supposed to do. We have fun in retirement. The thing that really makes my heart beat with fervor is the changes that I've seen in men, the changes that have taken place. In fact, they inspire me. They give me that feeling like when I saw baby Louise for the first time back in December. I'm filled with joy and fulfillment. For example, a guy named Dave. Dave, like me, was a consultant. He was in organizational development, kind of a serious guy. He decided to take a class in poetry. Dave takes classes in things he never did before just to try to grow. He took a class in poetry, and amazingly, he has written poems that are out of this world. They're publishable. They're that good. And then there's Ted. Ted was an advertising executive from New York City. He moved to Asheville and said, what's my purpose? So I think he found it. He's written 2 novels, The Fall of Spring and After and Before. They're available at Malaprops and on Amazon, and please read them. I've read them. They're great. That's Ted. Oh, and then we have Richard. Now, Richard is our river rat, literally. Richard is not comfortable unless he's in the water, not kayaking, but canoeing, and not just the French Broad. We're talking about the Colorado River. We're talking about the New and the Gauley. These are Class 5 and Class 6 rapids. Richard, at 70, just got back from canoeing, paddling, if you will, the Yampa River leading into the Green River in Colorado and Utah. Last year, he showed us pictures, and it was like, these are 10, 15-foot swales, and he's just canoeing through them. For my background, there's a word for Richard, and if any of you speak Yiddish, you'll know this word. It's Meshuggah. It means crazy. But we love Richard. And then we have Bill. Bill is one of the brightest people I've ever met in my life. He's not only bright, he's sensitive. He's not only sensitive, he's a gentleman farmer. He gave up riding his motorcycle just a couple of years ago. But Bill is a very, very, very special man. Bill has been battling Parkinson's for the past 14 years. Well, Bill and I decided to take a comedy class, and the graduation ceremony was that you had to stand up in front of 120 people, almost twice the size of this group, and tell for the first time your stand-up comedy routine. It was like being naked and having everybody in the audience saying, "Come on, man, make me laugh." It was a challenge. Bill was the first one up. He did his entire routine on the comedy, the humor of living with Parkinson's. He's given me permission to tell just one punchline, and I got to give you the theatrical part of it as well. Bill's line was, "You can't teach an old dog new tits." And we have Steady Eddie. Steady Eddie was born in Nazi Germany and managed to escape with his family when he was 3 years old, came to the United States, and he ended up having a tremendous career, 2 careers, in architecture and clinical psychology. Now there's a good fit. But in between, he went to that same University of Cincinnati, where he was a walk-on in the Cincinnati Bearcats basketball team. Go Cats. Ed, at 83, he and I were standing together before a meeting. I said, "Hey, Ed, what'd you do today?" He said, "Well, I was at the park and there was a pickup basketball game." Okay. He said, "So I asked them if I could play, and they said, yeah." "What? How old were the guys, Ed?" "Oh, they were in their 20s. Maybe one guy was about maybe in his 40s. "Ed, you're 83. How did you do?" He said, "Well, not bad, actually. I held my own, but I think my driving reverse layup isn't what it used to be." And then there's Gene. Remember Gene, the guy that killed baby seals for a living? He was also a self-avowed couch potato. He did this. He would wake up, he would go to work, he would come home, he would have dinner, watch TV, go to bed, rinse and repeat. But then Gene, in 2010, saw the movie The Way with Martin Sheen, schlepping across Europe on the El Camino de Santiago. Gene got inspired. He soon became the Forrest Gump of Men's Wisdom Works. He started walking and walking and walking. And in 2011, for the first time, he trekked, across El Camino de Santiago, 500 miles in 34 days. Gene has been back 3 times since. The first 2 were another 500-mile tributary off of El Camino, going through Italy and France and all over Europe. This year, he would be here tonight, but he's back on El Camino. He's 70. He's taking it a little easy. He's only doing 350 miles this year. Gene. The guy that really represents what Men's Wisdom Works means to me is a guy named Doug. Doug came up to me one day and he said, "Hey, thanks." I said, "What for?" "You saved my life." "What?" He said, "Well, you started these groups. By the way, now we have 15 groups, 150 men." And Doug comes up and says, "You saved my life." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you started these groups, and my group saved my life." "How so?" "Well, I've been married to the most wonderful woman for all these years. She's athletic, she's brilliant, she's active, she was so full of life. And for the last 8 years, she's had Alzheimer's." And Doug told me that he saw this decline taking, and then at one point, he didn't know what he was going to do. He didn't know if he could take the next breath. But he talked to his group about it, and now he's back. Doug is back completely. No therapy, no medication. God damn, I'm jealous. None of that stuff. But what he's done is he's found Julia. And Julia is his new life companion. And Doug and Julia now sailboat. They play golf. They go to all the community activities. And Doug is a whole man, and he's great. But another thing that happens with Men's Wisdom Works is the friendships that form. You have to understand, we don't know each other when we join this group. We just sign up and hope for the best. The friendships to me are what is absolutely amazing. Let me give you the best example I know. There were two guys, Nick and Randy. On paper, you could not find two dissimilar guys anywhere. Well, let me explain. Nick was a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant from Connecticut. His parents belonged to the same country club as did Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman. We're talking some bucks here. He went to the Asheville school for boarding school, and then off to New York and a fabulous career in corporate America. And then there's Randy. Randy is Jewish from New York City, went to City College, and taught special ed in the South Bronx and Harlem for 33 years. On paper, these guys have nothing in common. Randy did have an avocation, stand-up comedy. He's the guy that taught the class that Bill and I took. These guys on paper have nothing in common, but the friendship, the bond that these guys form have absolutely blown me away. They are and were brothers from the beginning throughout. I'm so impressed. And let me tell you why. Randy was not only Nick's best friend, but remember Betty, that woman that really helped me kick off Men's Wisdom Works? She was Nick's girlfriend. And she stayed with Nick through thick and thin. Because Nick introduced himself at that meeting by saying, I'm Nick, I'm terminal, I have 2 to 5 years to live. Nick would never have wanted anybody to feel sorry for him and go, oh. Nick instead developed a course called The Gift of Time. And the gift of time was all about getting everything in order so that your family had no decisions to make whatsoever. Everything would be in lockstep. And he taught this course. About a month before Nick passed, late last year, I was with him and I said, so Nick, are you still having any gifts of time at this late stage? Chuck, you won't believe it. I have the best gift of all. What's that? He said, well, the doctor told me I'm going to be dying of anemia, not of cancer. And then he told me that anemia is pain-free. And he looked at me and said, Chuck, there's no better gift in this world. Nick, Randy, and Betty. What a wonderful trio they were for these past 6 years. You see, Nick was one death, but there's another one that reminds me of the strength of Men's Wisdom Works. There was a guy named Larry, and Larry was the facilitator for the second group to form. Now, I got to tell you, when these groups form, I always get a kick out of it, because if I was at a recruiting table trying to sign guys up, they would say, yeah, it looks all right. And their wives, the women that we're with, would always give them a big elbow on the side and say, you really need that. Well, Larry was one of those guys, and Larry became the facilitator for Group 2, and he also was diagnosed with terminal cancer. But it was his memorial service that really said so much about MWW. His wife, Meredith, said that she was so shocked because a nurse came up to her while she was in hospice, while she was visiting Larry in hospice, and the nurse said to her, who are all these men? We have never seen so many men before in this hospice. Where do they come from? And Meredith just smiled and said, those are Larry's brothers from his men's group. So folks, that's Men's Wisdom Works. What have I learned through all this? Well, first of all, good things can come from depression. You just have to wait. It happens. Secondly, we picked up on Albert's words, and that's what drives us every day for the last 9 years that we've been around, because we are fucking authentic. And let me show you why that means so much. Because now we do what men aren't supposed to do. We open up. We share the most intimate personal details with each other. We party. And we're also filled with compassion. And that proves to every one of us a fact that we all know now, and that is that men's wisdom indeed works. Thank you all. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Betty. Thank you, Richard. Thank you all.